Investing time, energy, and effort to learn something and then forgetting it is one of the greatest fears that I've always had. And I think it's because time is really your only limited resource. So, with the month of Ramadan coming to an end, taking the time and putting in the effort to actually fast, abstain from two things which is usually permissible for a Muslim. But as an act of worship and as an act of sacrifice, we give up or we abstain from these two things for 29 to 30 days. Now, there has to be some learning out of all of this, and there has to be some objective that we wanted to achieve, and we achieved, or at least we came close to it. So for today's journaling session, what I decided to do was to sit down and write down my greatest learnings from the month of Ramadan. Now, I'm using the month of Ramadan and my experience as the experiment, not experiment actually, the example to explain this to you guys, but you can really apply it to anything, all right? So what I've got written down essentially is, so it's called Reflections on Ramadan. And the key question that I wanted to ask myself is, this time around, Ramadan was unique. And I always prefer to use words like unique and challenging rather than a big problem or, a difficult one or whatever, just because of the negative connotation that those words bring. And we know that our minds are listening to the words that come out of our mouth. So we got to be careful with that one. So the question I asked myself was, if Ramadan had an objective, if fasting in Ramadan had an objective, and if we could achieve that objective regardless of the existing conditions, and I'm referring specifically to the lockdown, then there really isn't any problem. And the first thing that helped me stop myself from panicking is that the Almighty states in the Holy Quran that we will be tested. Just because you are a believer and you accept the faith and you go about doing things in an Islamic way doesn't mean that your life is going to be easy. You are definitely going to be tested, and we are told that explicitly in writing. All right. So, and I'll give you an example that you can relate to on any scale. Say you are representing your school or your company sports team. It could be rugby, it could be cricket, swimming, whatever it is. Now, there is an element amongst all the goals that you might have. There has to be an element there where you want to serve your organization, where you want to give back to your school or represent your school. And sometimes we tend to think that just because that's our intention or that's a part of our intention, that the organization has to give it undue support and cannot question anything that we do with regards to us trying to achieve that or serve our organization or objective. But the reality is that doesn't happen. When I was in school, when I was playing rugby for school, it didn't mean that whenever I used the word, hey, I'm doing this for college, that everyone just allowed me to do anything I wanted to do. I was still questioned. There were still challenges and we still had to overcome it. And that's what really justifies if you are true to the cause and if you're willing to go the extra mile and if you actually mean it when you say that you are willing to sacrifice whatever it is to achieve the goal or the objective for the organization or the institution or whatever. So the same thing applied for us in Ramadan. This time we were tested in a different way. It wasn't our usual routine. We couldn't go to the mosque. We couldn't go out to give charity. We couldn't go out to have iftars with our families, spend time with our families physically. But the objective of Ramadan is not to go to the mosque. The objective of Ramadan is not to give charity, at least not in itself. These are all acts which are a part of the greater equation of achieving what we call taqwa. Taqwa being the objective of Ramadan. Now, it really doesn't matter what that means. Basically, the only takeaway you should have is there's something that we need to achieve in Ramadan, and there are certain things we have to do to achieve it. And if those certain things can be altered, can be changed, can be shifted a little bit to adjust to the existing environment that we are playing in and still achieve the objective, then there really is no problem. And that's what I realized, So in order for us to achieve taqwa, there are a couple of things that we need to do. And here's how I did it. And many of us did it this time around in Ramadan. Obligatory prayers. One of the beautiful things in Islam is that we have no intermediary in speaking to the Creator or speaking to the Almighty. We do not have to go through a religious person or through an institution. We can directly communicate with our Creator. So why then can't we pray at home? And why then can't we maintain that connection on our own? Anyway, 95% of our prayers that we do, even outside of lockdown, are performed on our own. At least for the most people. Right? So our obligatory prayers were not stopped. We were able to do it. Supplementary prayers, meaning additional prayers. It could be our Taraweeh prayers, which we used to do in the mosque. It can be done at home. If you have the numbers, you can do it together as a group. If not, you can even perform it on your own. That's completely fine. And what we call tahajjud prayers, which we did in the last 10 days. We had extensive sessions. Again, if you had large number of family members at home, you could have done it as a group. If not, you could have done it by yourself. So there was no issue there. And post-obligatory prayers, what we call supplementary prayers that we do on the daily right after our obligatory prayers. The lockdown didn't prevent us from doing that. So what was really the issue? There was no problem there, all right? Supplications after prayer. So there were certain supplications that we should do, which is all a part of attaining this objective, right, of Ramadan, taqwa, which could be done. What we call dua, essentially speaking to your Creator and asking to help you with your troubles, to forgive you for your shortcomings, so on and so forth. There's no necessity for you to do that from a mosque. Yes, it could be more rewarding and more beneficial, but under the circumstances, this is the best you could do. And we could do it, and we did it. Fasting didn't stop us, right? The key objective of fasting is to refrain from two things which are usually permissible for a Muslim, and that is food, which is halal, and sexual desires, which are permissible. But you're expected to stay away from it for the time period of the fast as a part of the sacrifice, right? And there was nothing with regards to the lockdown that prevented us from doing that, right? And charity. Thanks to the development in technology, we were able to do charity online. Right? You could simply transfer the funds. There were so many trustworthy organizations out there that you could have transferred funds to. Or if you had less fortunate relative, you could have simply transferred it to their accounts. So nothing stopped us from doing charity. All right? And charity is not just about doing things for people outside. It's also about doing things for people in your home, in your family. So helping your mom, helping your dad, helping your siblings, be it with arranging the tables or cooking or cleaning or whatever. That's charity too. You know, Islam is so simple, even smiling is a charity, right? So nothing about the lockdown prevented us from doing that, yeah? And then we have what we call sadaqah. I mean, that again covers what I mentioned in charity. And what we call dawah. So dawah is essentially spreading the message and the beauty of the religion. And for us this time, we did a Zoom into Ramadan session where we had like on average 40 to 50 kids logging in 3 times a week throughout the entire month to learn and understand the beauty of Islam, right? And thanks to technology, again, there was nothing stopping us. So the key takeaway I want all of us to take from this experience that I had, and I'm sure a lot of brothers and sisters out there had, is that our goals, our objectives shouldn't change. Things are always going to, in terms of an environment, change, right? Change is the only thing that's permanent. So whatever goal or objective we have in life, just because the conditions change or the environment changes or it becomes harder or more difficult or more challenging, that does not mean that you give up on your goals and objectives. It simply means that you change how you achieve those goals and objectives. That is the key takeaway that I took down from the month of Ramadan and from my journaling session here today. Because if I don't write this down, like I always tell you guys, we will forget it. And 29 days of all of this sacrifice that we made would be somewhat of a waste if we are unable to take the lessons we learned and then apply it into the months ahead. And hopefully we'll be around for another Ramadan to look back and think, wow, those 29 to 30 days that I really sacrificed, committed, dedicated, and gave up so much were actually worth it. Think about it, guys.